Happy Monday. Welcome back to the Sports Ticket with Kendall Mark. I'm Kevin Gorg on a Snownami Monday. Snow is coming down. Traffic is miserable, and we're glad you joined us here on the Alive and Social Network. We are sponsored by Coors Light, Dave & Buster's in Edina at the Southdale Mall, and Patrick McGovern's Pub, West 7th in St. Paul. On the heels of another successful Vikings football weekend, we also put the bow and close up a depressing and unsuccessful Gopher football season. We talk about the Minnesota Wild, who are in a 1-4-2 slump in their last 7, and there's some drama with one of their captains and head coach Mike Yeo. And we have our special guest on later in the show, tail end, last segment, Scotty Bowman. It's terrific to have a Hall of Famer, NHL legend. Maybe you can make a pretty strong case for the greatest coach in the history of the National Hockey League. 9 Stanley Cups as a head coach, 5 more in the administrative side. He currently works as a senior advisor for the Chicago Blackhawks. Scotty Bowman on the show. Final segment today, so you definitely want to stick around for that, right, Kendall?
Heck yes. I'm really excited. I mean, Aaron, how do you just swing that?
Yeah, great get by our producer here.
He's my grandpa's golf buddy down in Florida.
Wow.
Good old boys, the golf buddies.
That's pretty cool. That's a nice little tie-in, and Aaron, our producer, has hooked that up, and we're really looking forward to visiting with Mr. Bowman and talking about the Chicago Blackhawks, talk about Jacques Lemaire and Mario Tremblay, 2 former coaches with the Wild who played in the middle of the 70s, and what a run it was in the 70s for the Canadians. They won the Cup in 73, 76, 77, 78, and 79. Bowman also won the Cup in 92. You recall the Pittsburgh Penguins were in the middle of back-to-back Stanley Cups, and 91, they broke our hearts with Badger Bob Johnson behind the bench. He passed away, so Scotty Bowman took over in 92, and in 93, Norm Green ripped out our hockey-loving hearts and took our North Stars down to Dallas to become the Dallas Stars. And then Scotty Bowman also won a couple cups, including 97, 98, and 2002 with the Detroit Red Wings. 9 times head coach behind the bench of a Stanley Cup winner. That is pretty remarkable.
I can't even believe that that's a thing. So, I think anybody who knows anything about hockey knows who Scotty Bowman is. Even if you're like, God, the name just sounds really familiar. You know what I mean? Like one of those things. But you don't know much about him. And, here, where did I just see this? His teams made it to the Stanley Cup Finals a record of 13 times, and the semifinals a record of 16 times. Like, how you can jump from organization to organization like that and continue to have that kind of a winning record. I mean, I was just really, truly just thinking about this in the car today, more about the Gophers than anything else, and about the Vikings and coaching issues we've had and stuff, and how, look at the Vikings and how much we flipped in 2 years because of coaching, and people were just so sad, like, oh, we're not giving, enough time to develop the program, but look what Zimmer's done in 2 years because he's just a better coach.
Yeah, Leslie Frazier was a nice guy. And he's like the perfect assistant coach, but you knew he wasn't getting the most out of the players in that room. Where Mike Zimmer, you kind of feel like, they're not doing it. He's got him by the neck up against the wall. And again, it's just amazing to see the culture change that this team has had, and the 4 consecutive road wins. And this was a perfect situation this week after the tough loss at home to Green Bay to see the team kind of take a step back. And Green Bay loses on Thanksgiving night. Viking teams of years gone by lose that game yesterday, and there were certain points in the game where they easily could have had the momentum shift the other way. You look back at a couple of key situations in that game, and the defense, time and time again, got the job done. Adrian Peterson is back in form. He's having an MVP type of season, and it took him a while to get going. I listened to him do a live interview today with Paul Allen locally here in the Twin Cities on KFAN, and he talked about how the first couple of weeks he was so out of sync after being away from football for a year. And we talked about that here on the Sports Ticket earlier this year, that's a big transition for a guy, even a guy that's a veteran, that's 30 years old, that's been around the block a few times, to get back into sync with the offensive line where there's been major changes, losing a guard, losing a center. So it's great to see the Vikings with defense and a running game become a playoff fixture. They're going to be in the playoffs now. It's just a matter of whether they can seal the deal and win the Central Division, but they're in a great spot to do just that. And yesterday they were in Atlanta, knowing that Green Bay had lost to the Bears on Thanksgiving night, with an opportunity to once again take sole possession of first place. And here's what the game sounded like yesterday from the Georgia Dome.
Peterson dancing, headed to the end zone, touchdown. 7-0 Vikings. Now the Falcons have it for the second time. They pitch it to Coleman. And he gets around the edge. Tevin Coleman, one man apiece. And now he fumbles the football, and Minnesota has recovered. Exum picks it up. Anthony Barr punched it away.
Anthony Barr right there shows what hustle, effort, and speed can do for you. A tremendous play going after the ball. Tevin Coleman thinks he's scoring. Instead, Anthony Barr knocks it off.
Blitz, Ryan eludes on the run, throwing. Intercepted! It's intercepted by Terrence Newman. Peterson, left side. Peterson still going. Touchdown!
He's so well conditioned. He's so strong. He's got so much will. As the game goes on, he wears a defense out. That's what he's done to this Atlanta Falcons defense, who again was #1 rated in stopping the rush today. That's a different beast right there in Adrian Peterson.
His 99th career touchdown, 158 yards on the ground for the great Adrian Peterson. My goodness. All right, Vikings 20, Falcons 10. Minnesota in first place at 8-3.
There it is. Old school Vikings fans know this one.
Honor your name.
Kendall
Let's
knows it
get
too.
the first down, then get the touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em.
Nice.
Fight, 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 fight. Skol, Vikings, run up the score. We'll ask for more. V-I-K-I-N-G-S.
Skol Vikings, let's go.
Boom.
Well, they did that yesterday. Great win. Great job by you, by the way.
Thank you.
But I love what John Lynch, the analyst for Fox Sports yesterday, had to say about Adrian Peterson, because it is true. He seems to get better as the game goes on. He is a bruising back. He's got the great speed. You saw him yesterday again. He's got the weapons to make it happen at crunch time. That play around the left end we just heard. Spectacular. And that's what you need from this guy. And, yeah, off the field, we've talked about it numerous times here in the Sports Ticket. It hasn't been pretty. Hopefully he gets all that stuff squared away. But when you just break down what he means to this team as a football player, there's no doubt he's the most important guy in the field, no question. He makes Teddy better. He gives that defense a chance to relax. They can chew clock when he's on his game. And right now it looks like the Adrian Peterson we saw a couple years ago when he was trying to break Eric Dickerson's record for yardage for a running back. He looks like that guy that you can almost bank on every single week, even against Seattle next week at TCF Bank, to get you over 100 yards and at least one touchdown. And that is rare in this day and age in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm. He runs with just such wild abandon. It's so aggressive. It's like insanity sometimes. And you could tell a few times during this game, they tried to do what the Packers did and really like fluster him up, whether that be late hits or kneeing him when he's on the ground, things like that. But he just wasn't taking it. He would get so frustrated with himself, as he's apt to do if he gets negative yardage. He puts both of those fists up and has a little mini temper tantrum. But I like that about the guy. And I think having him at that level is clearly what our offense is all about. And then when he leaves, people don't really know what to think. And then people like McKinnon can get a bunch of yardage because they don't really know what they're blocking or what they're guarding for. And Kyle Rudolph has really been one of Teddy's key receivers as of late, and he needs to be, because he's a bull when he gets the ball. We had several plays yesterday where he threw it to a tight end, whether that be him or what's his name, the other tight end.
There's three of them.
Well,
so
the one that's the one that's not Kyle Rudolph, and he's whatever, the other guy. So
you're on a roll. Just go ahead.
They just bowled over people. Like they just bowl over the attack. And I love to see that. And I think I'm shocked because clearly the last touchdown was a garbage touchdown. So 3 points really when you think about it.
That was just, let's keep the clock running. Let's, let Atlanta put the ball in play. And, knowing that if they let them score, but they run the clock out, the game's over. And so, that didn't bother me a bit. 3 points on the road. And I think the key factor going in, we talked about it last week, was could they limit Julio Jones? Julio Jones is one of the 2 or 3 best weapons when it comes to wide receivers in the National Football League. And when you look at his stats yesterday, it tells the story. 5 catches, 56 yards, no touchdowns. They were phenomenal on defense, and they did it without the hitman. Harrison Smith didn't make the trip, and when I saw that, I kind of cringed. I'm like, uh-oh. He plays such a vital role back there in the secondary, but even without Harrison, they were able to get the job done. Impressive effort by the defense. Great bounce-back performance by the entire team after not looking themselves at home against Green Bay the week before. And there was no carryover. They came out with a purpose, the defense and the running game, the blocking, everything. It all worked together. A couple of key interceptions by Captain Mutterlin and Terrence Newman. And then the play that we heard that Aaron played back for us, to me, one of the most critical plays of the game, the punched fumble by Anthony Barr. A guy his size chasing down a running back with the speed of Tevin Coleman. That was spectacular to watch. Not many guys that play on the line can make that play. Barr made a spectacular play. It was a game changer because Coleman was either going to score or get that ball inside the 10 where it's first and goal. The place was jumping, and all of a sudden you punch that ball out. It's like taking points off of the scoreboard, at least 3, but most likely 7. Those kind of plays cannot be overlooked. They've flustered Matty Ryan, and really just start to finish, that was a pure team effort. And I'm very hopeful now that the Vikings can win the division. They're going to be in the playoffs now at 8-3 with 3 of their last 5 at home. They're going to be in the playoffs. The season looks like this. They are home to Seattle this week. Vegas has Seattle as a small 1-point favorite. Then they go to Arizona the following Thursday. That's going to be a really tough game. The Vikings will be a legitimate underdog in that game. But then you're home to Chicago, home to the Giants, and then the game that likely decides the division. It probably comes down to this. It probably gets flexed to the Sunday night game, closing night of the National Football League. Vikings at Green Bay. And hopefully the second time around, the spotlight doesn't bother this club, because when they play like they did yesterday, they're a better team than Green Bay. And I mean that right now. They are a better team than Green Bay, and I know they whipped our tails 30-13 8 days ago, but that Viking team threw in a clunker. That happens throughout the course of a season. You're going to have a game where, for whatever reason, you're not on your game, and none of them played very well, whether it was the nerves, the spotlight, the opponent, but they'll be better the next time around. And yesterday was a key step in the right direction, and this week should be a lot of fun with the Seahawks coming to town. Kendall, the question I've got for you as a Vikings fan, before the season started, so before we got to 8-3, before we have really seen this coaching staff allow this team to blossom and take the next step, what was your expectation? What would have been a successful year looking back if we turn the clock back to September? Think of Labor Day, think of the end of the State Fair. They just finished 7-9. What was the measuring stick for you to say that Mike Zimmer and the coaching staff had a good year with the Vikings?
I really would have wanted to see 9 wins. I mean, period. I don't think that would be too much to ask for a team that was said to have it all last year and clearly couldn't because they didn't have their star running back. So to expect them to have it this year, I hope so. I think that it started out that first game against the 49ers. Seriously.
Wow, was that ugly.
Every Minnesota fan was like, ugh. Brian Robinson was just on one of the radio shows this morning, and he was talking about if you could they asked, if you could do one of the 3 games you guys have lost over again. Everybody thinks you'd say Green Bay because that's the big game. And he was like, oh, the 49ers game. It just was not indicative of who we are and how we play. And it was so embarrassing that we lost the way that we did, and we shouldn't have, especially to that team that is now what, 3-8? 3-8, yeah, 3-8. So I would say it's gotten better now, though. Looking at things, it's like if we don't do well and even make it through the first round of the playoffs, I'm going to be so upset.
But again, it's a process of taking one step at a time, and I think that I would have said 9 would have been great, and I would have thought that 9 would have put you in the playoff hunt. I was expecting 9 wins. I thought they'd be better. I did not see this coming. I did not see 8-3 coming. But as the season's progressed, I'm with you, where the expectation certainly changes. As I sit here now, looking at this club that's 8-3, I expect them to be in the playoffs for certain. I mean, they'd have to win 2 of their last 5. They should do that. But, I mean, the big one for me is to win the division. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, you stuff it in the face of the Packers, which now you've got the inside track again. You were given a gift by the Chicago Bears.
Thank you.
Who somehow, some way went down there on Brett Favre night at Lambeau Thanksgiving evening with all the eyeballs throughout the country on that game. They found a way to win. They earned that win, and that really was a huge, huge break for the Vikings. So now, remember that they won this week, which is great. Packers play on Thursday night again, ironically, this week. And they're at Detroit, and the natural tendency would be, well, Detroit went down there a couple weeks ago and embarrassed the Packers. It's payback time. And a lot of times in the division, that happens. That's how it plays out. There's a lot of, especially if there's an upset the first time around, the favorite comes back the next time and gets back in the win column. But I'll say this. The Lions are playing good football right now. They've won 3 of their last 4. They looked awesome albeit against a dysfunctional Eagles team on Thanksgiving. But they're healthy right now. Calvin Johnson is balling right now. And even though they don't have much of a running game, the fact that they're at home and the fact that Green Bay has lost some swagger and lost some confidence, I think Green Bay wins the game, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. I think it's going to be a great game on Thursday, and I think it's a game that if the Packers lose that game on Thursday, it might be lights out for the division. The Vikings might have it right then and there because the enthusiasm they'll take to the field Sunday, knowing they can put a couple games in between themselves and their arch rivals, might just carry them through. I think Packers should win, but we'll see. I think that's a very intriguing matchup. It's got a lot of fantasy implications. As always on Monday here on the Sports Ticket, we're going to give you some waiver wire players to pluck, and there are some dandies this week off some key injuries that we saw over the weekend, including one big one last night that we haven't heard a final tally on with Gronk, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We're also going to put a bow on the Gopher football season. We'll get to that in a second here, Kendall. I don't want to depress our listeners here, our season ticket holders, but what a debacle. And I'm so sick and tired of Wisconsin taking that axe to our goalpost. It happens every single year. But we're going to get to that. We've still got wild chatter as they flounder their way through the end of November like they always do, and 1-4-2 in their last 7.
Ugh.
Hawks tomorrow night in Chicago on NBC Sports Network. But before we do that, let's tie up this Vikings chatter. 5 games left. I want to put you on the spot. We're going to come back and check these numbers.
Okay.
Home to Seattle, at Arizona, home to Chicago, home to the Giants, at Green Bay. 5 games left. Vikings are 8-3 right now. What is the record the Vikings will finish with at the end of the regular season, Miss Kendall?
Okay, let's go each game, and then I'll tally it up
It's
as I
pick
go.
'em this weekend against Seattle,
Okay.
so it's a coin flip type of game.
I say we're home, we win. I think I'm going to
So now
that
we're
game.
9-3.
Yep.
Okay, you're going to be there. At Arizona, they're going to likely be a 5 or 6 point underdog. That's going to be a tough one.
I don't think we're going to win that one.
Fair point. Okay,
9-4.
Home to Chicago.
Yep. 10-4.
10-4. Home to the Giants.
I'm going to give it to us because we're at home, and I
Won't
hope
be
that
easy,
that will
but they'll
help.
win.
But it'll be a very close knuckle bite game.
Now we're 11-4 going to Green Bay.
know.
They're likely going to be 10-5 at this point. We're going to be 11-4. But if they win that game and both teams finish 11-5, they clearly have the tiebreaker. They win the division, Miss Kendall. It's going to be on national TV. Sunday Spotlight game, NBC, Chris Collinsworth, Al Michaels, our very own Michelle Tafoya sidelines. Snow
Michelle.
likely in the forecast. Teddy versus A-Rod. Game 2 of the 2-game set. Division
louder.
winner. Vikings either tie or win. What happens? Be honest. What happens?
I don't think we can win.
I knew you were going that way, and you're probably right. We're going to lose, aren't we?
We're totally going to lose.
But we're going to
at that
finish
game.
11-5. It's an awesome season off 7-9, and we're going to have a chance to probably host a playoff game. So let's just calm down. No tears right now. Let's let it play out.
I hate the Packers so much.
Maybe the Lions will do us that favor on Thursday night. But the Vikings are rolling. They get Seattle this week at the bank. It's going to be awesome. And we'll have a short time now to briefly talk a little fantasy football. We haven't heard on Gronk yet, but pay attention. It didn't look good. He got carted off last night as my beloved Denver Broncos took an overtime win against Belichick, Brady, and the awesome, and I do mean awesome, Patriots. Those guys are so clutch. The end of the game, that drive, that just sums up why Tom Brady is so freaking good. Much as I hate to say it, that was remarkable. But the Broncos got it done. Scott Chandler is a name you're going to need to pay attention to this week on the waiver wire. If Gronk is out for any amount of time, and including this next game next week, Scott Chandler, the tight end for New England, will be a major red zone target. He scored last night even with Gronk on the field. But if you're looking for a tight end on the waiver wire, Scott Chandler's your guy. Running back time, always this late in the year, you want to take a look at a running back that's going to get a lion's share of the looks in the red zone for a good team. Look no further than David Johnson of Arizona. Their top 2 backs are hurt. Chris Johnson and Andre Ellington are hurt. David Johnson is a terrific pickup from Arizona running back. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin, we're probably a little late. We missed the wedding. Let's hope this isn't the funeral next week. But I'll tell you right now, Doug Baldwin's a guy you're going to want to take a look at. He has become the primary target for Russell Wilson. He had 3 touchdowns yesterday. And with another key injury, and that injury was to their tight end, and now again, knowing that the Beast is not playing, you got Rawls in there, Graham is out for the year, Baldwin becomes a major fixture in their offense, and you don't want to see him put up too much against the Vikings this week, and I respect the Vikings defense, but long term, with 5 weeks to go, or at least 4 in fantasy football, Doug Baldwin's one to consider. Running back, Jay Ajayi of Miami. He's starting to outplay Jay Ajayi. Yeah, something called Ajayi, starting to take over the backfield in Miami. The Miller is really struggling. Ajayi's getting the lion's share of the looks. Give him a little peek. And then C.J. Anderson, because Ronnie Hillman's been so good for Denver, a lot of people dropped this guy. And, a year ago he was awesome. Then he was a first or second round pick this year, and then people got frustrated. And a lot of people, at least half, I think 55% right now, he's available. C.J. Anderson, running back, Denver Broncos, still going to share the backfield with Hillman, but you saw last night, this guy still got some juice in the tank, and he also played well outdoors in bad weather, which is probably what he's going to see here down the stretch. Those are 5 players: Chandler, David Johnson, Doug Baldwin, Jay Ajayi, and C.J. Anderson, your waiver wire pluckers for this week's show. Every Monday, we'll give you 5 players to grab here on the Sports Ticket. Now, Kendall, we got to do it. We got to tie up this Gopher season. It was another ass-whooping at the hands of our border battle rivals from Wisconsin. We get the pick 6 to start the game. Everybody's all excited. But let me throw some numbers at you guys. The Badgers this year, inside of the Big Ten, before Saturday, were averaging a very paltry 109 yards on the ground. The Gophers came in Big Ten competition, averaging 147 yards on the ground. So the line of scrimmage on paper favored the Minnesota Gophers.
Yep.
Saturday, Minnesota rushing yards, 53. Wisconsin, 257. I don't care how you slice it. That was a whooping of monstrous proportions. Wisconsin on both of the lines of scrimmage. It looked like a Division I college team taking on a high school team. They were pushing the goal sides of the ball. It was excruciating to watch.
Horrible.
Excruciating to watch. And so, second half of the year, our defense sucked. Bottom line, sucked. Our offense actually got better as the year went on. And now Tracy Claeys, a couple days removed from the season, his first move is to fire the quarterback's coach and the defensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator, Matt Limegrover. Offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach gone. I can't figure this out. I'm having a heck of a time. And we just were talking on our way into the studio here with Scott Applebaum from Apples to Apples. I know that you guys talked about it, and that was a focal point of their show, but I can't figure this move out because it looked to me like the offense actually got better as the year went on. The defense got worse. Right?
I think that anybody who's even a quasi-Gopher fan could see that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like watching that Badger game, it was, 2 of their possessions and 14 of their points were on turnovers.
We only coughed it up 5 times. We did have 5 turnovers. There is that.
And so that was huge. But our defense couldn't stop anything. They couldn't stop my grandma, and she was in a wheelchair.
She's old.
Yeah,
really old.
Couldn't do anything, and it was so annoying. I was watching it at the X because they have those little TVs upstairs.
We were doing the same thing in the mess hall.
So I was watching it upstairs with all the camera behind the scenes guys, and everybody's watching. They're like, "Oh, getting all frustrated and horrible," and it was.
It's terrible.
So disappointing. And then it comes out on Twitter. Then you find everything out on Twitter these days. Everything about Matt Limegrover, and I'm like, oh, did I read that right? Or did he keep him? And it just says that they fired him? Or
he's gone.
I get it. I mean, you want to redo the staff. It's your staff now. It's your thing. You're going to start
that part
it all
I get
over.
for sure, yeah.
It just seemed like an interesting move, to say the least.
Yeah, Gopher football finishes the season 5-7, 2-6 inside of the Big Ten. There'll be no bowl game this year. This on the heels of a season where
never say never.
Well, I don't want it. There's no way they should go to a bowl at 5-7. If it's gotten that watered down, then we should just turn down the invitation. But last year they played on New Year's Day. They played Missouri, an SEC team. They put up 8 wins. They had a great year. Now they lost some great players. We've talked about it at time and time again in the show here. But bottom line is they got to get better in a hurry. And if you're going to bring in a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback's coach, that means that there's likely going to be a transitional period here where they're going to struggle. I mean,
Right.
let's just be honest. It's going to be a bit of a struggle.
That just reminded me. I can't remember what kid it was, but somebody who had committed to the U of M as soon as that
He was
news.
a quarterback but he was a guy that was probably recruited by this Jim Zabrowski, the quarterback's coach that got let go. So I'm not going to let that.
Was it him? Is that who I saw on Twitter?
Yeah, it was a quarterback. So,
oh, God.
Leitner's back. He got better as the year went on. Leitner finished the year with 2,478 yards in 12 games. So roughly 200 yards a game, which is okay. It's not great. It's okay. His completion percentage was 57.8. Again, kind of in the middle there. Not great, not terrible. But, it's the type of season that left you wanting for more. They left some wins on the table. And the biggest thing is this is a down Wisconsin team. You're at home, and you allow Wisconsin to come in once again and push you around. 12 in a row for the Badgers, 19 of the last 21. I'm not even sure I can call it a rivalry game because the Gophers don't win often enough to make it a rivalry game. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It just gets old, and it gets frustrating. And as great as the Vikings season looks like it's going to be, the Gopher season sucks, and I don't want to say much more about it. Jerry Kill, that was the coolest part for me, is Jerry Kill led the team out of the tunnel and onto the field. He was on the sidelines kind of as a cheerleader really for the team, just to be there to support them, which I thought was fantastic. It didn't work. The better team once again was Wisconsin. They win. Season's over. No bowl game. I like Tracy Claeys. I'm very perplexed by these decisions, but I'm not there.
Right.
And I don't understand what goes on behind closed doors. And it is his team, his program. And so we'll move on. And if you ever have any questions, as always, tweet us up. We can get back into Gopher football on Thursday if you want. We're not planning on it, but if you want it, we'll bring
really
it for
want
you.
To.
At FSN Gorg, at MS Kendall Mark, KENDALLMARK.
That's Ms. Kendall Mark to you. Yep,
But
was Shaniqua. Came out.
Shaniqua comes out once in a while on the show. She's very sassy. We're going to get into some wild chatter, and then, of course, our special guest at the end of the show, Scotty Bowman, hockey legend, Hall of Fame coach. Scotty Bowman, 9 cups as a coach, 5 more as a member of the front office of certain teams, and the Wild right now scruffling. But before we get there, and then Thursday's a home game, so we're going to be over at Patrick McGovern's Pub on West 7th in St. Paul, having our Coors Light. Next Monday, we will be at Dave & Buster's, Annie Dinah, at the Southdale Mall. Bring the kiddies. Come on over. Check it out. Next Monday, it'll be 5 o'clock at Dave & Buster's, Southdale. And that's spectacular. But this Thursday, 3:30 to 4:30 to get you ready for Wild hockey. And before we get to Scotty Bowman, Kendall, a couple of quick advertisements for us.
Advertisements. I love when people say it like that. So thank you. I appreciate that. So when you're not catching our show on Mondays and Thursdays, you can catch a couple other ones on the Alive and Social Network. One of them we talk about a lot on the show because if you haven't checked it out yet, clearly you just don't listen to us, and that's silly because everyone should listen. If not to me, at least to Aaron. You thought I was going to say you, didn't you, Gordon?
I did. I was hoping.
So that's Wild Wednesdays. Check it out. It's all about the NHL and hockey in general. Doesn't have to just be the NHL. They talk a little bit about college. They talk about the Wild. They talk about high schools. I don't know. They talk about everything. But that's with Scott Schweitz and Sarah Sheely. Wild Wednesdays from 5 to 6 at Bennett's Chop House in St. Paul. Otherwise, your geek show. It's a little bit different than what we've got going on here, which, hey, it's good. Everybody's got a couple different sides, and geekness can just be one of them. That show's on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Check them all out on aliveandsocial.com.
Well, we're in the heart of hockey season, and the Minnesota Wild are doing what they've done for the last 4 years under Mike Yeo. They've hit the mid-season blues. They're 1-4-2 in their last 7, and their reward after blowing a 3-goal lead over the weekend against the Dallas Stars is a trip to Chicago, to one of my favorite buildings in the league, the United Center, to take on the Stanley Cup winners from last year, the Chicago Blackhawks, and we are lucky enough to be joined by their senior advisor of hockey operations, a very familiar name to all of us here in the state of hockey. He is Scotty Bowman, the legendary coach. Mr. Bowman, thank you for taking some time to join us today.
Oh, it's great to be on.
Well, again, it's been on one of those seasons again up here in Minnesota where we get off to the hot start. We've seen this the last couple of years under Mike Yeo. From a coaching perspective, he's called these guys out like he did last year here recently, and there's been some ruffled feathers by players with some credentials like Ryan Suter in that locker room where it hasn't gone over real well here in the last 24 hours. How do you balance that from a coaching perspective where you've got to say something, you're upset, but you've got some players in that room that you want to keep on your side to keep the team all pulling in the same direction?
Well, I think you look at the total picture, and we've only gone through about a third of the season, just past the quarter pole. And, you know, the Central Division, as everyone knows, compared to the other three, there's a pretty good chance that, I think there'll be an excellent chance, 5 teams in the Central will probably be in the 8 and 3 from the Pacific. So, but the problem is the Central Division is so tough. And we've seen some changes. Like Winnipeg started off terrific, and they've had a tough month in November, and they've dipped down. And I think teams, they go in cycles, and also the fact that the teams have a core of about four to six players, depending on what team it is. And we saw what happened to Chicago when Duncan Keith went out for a month. They were hardly at 500. And the Wild have the same type of problem. They were going along pretty good, and they ran into a couple of injuries. Parise, of course, and that's one of their real core players. So I think players get frustrated when they see it's a tough division, and they're going to say things, but on to the next game is what I usually, I kind of push those things aside, and they're for the media to worry about, not for the players.
Scotty, teams that you coached were able to repeat as Cup champions multiple times. It's not an easy thing to do. For the Blackhawks this year, it's a completely different looking roster. Some key players are not there anymore. What type of challenges are the Blackhawks facing knowing that?
Well, when you really think of the changes that had to be made, I guess the one change that kind of blindsided everybody was they were really hoping a very good young player, Brandon Saad, 2 cups already, just about 22 years of age. And, they were hoping that he would take a bridge contract to get through the next couple of years, and then hope that he would join the core group, because some of them would be moving on at that time. But, it didn't happen, and they were forced to make a move. But when you really analyze the big changes in the team, Brandon Saad was traded to make room for the contracts of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, for sure. Their contract started in July 1st. And Patrick Sharp was another player that was in the core, but he was moving on. And really, Saad and Sharp have been replaced, fortunately for the Hawks. The Anisimov trade with Saad has worked out very well. They acquired a good second-line center behind Toews, which they've been looking for a few years now, and then getting a real windfall in Panarin, Artur Panarin from Russia, not even a draft pick, 23 years old, and he's fit into just like a glove with Kane. So really, the one player they haven't replaced so far has been Johnny Oduya, who signed with Dallas, but they've got Daly coming along. They've got a couple of young defensemen that they had up. They had Gustafsson and they had Svedberg. They're looking at those. They're looking at down the line, I guess, down the road. But the transition has not been as bad as some people make out, because Panarin's 20-point-a-game guy is in the lead for the rookie. Anisimov's already got 10 goals. So, and then of course Kane's had a great start. But I don't think the transition has been that bad when you really analyze it, player for player.
I wanted to ask you specifically, we're talking about younger players. I see a lot of comparisons between Kane and Teravainen, just the way that they skate, the way that they handle the puck. As someone who watches a lot of the Blackhawks, what do you think about that comparison?
Well, it's tough to compare players like with Patrick Kane. He's one of those special kind of players. But yeah, Teravainen didn't have the same experience as Patrick. He was on the development program in Ann Arbor. He was fast-tracked after that. He went and played junior hockey in London. He won the scoring. He broke in with the Hawks. He's in his 6th or 7th year now. And, he even though he's 27 years of age, he's been around a long time, and he's had the 3 cup wins. So it's a little early to say that, but they do handle the puck very well. I don't think that Teravainen's had the confidence going in as Kane has, but they do make plays. Patrick's changed his game a little bit the last little while, and now the threat of him scoring is probably just as much as him, making a play.
That's the legendary voice of Scotty Bowman, hockey coach who won just 9 cups as a coach, 5 more as a gentleman in the front office, including last year's cup with the Chicago Blackhawks. Scotty, you hail from Quebec, and I cut my teeth in the 70s and 80s as a hockey fan here in the Twin Cities, watching your great Canadians teams. And then as they came into the league, the Quebec Nordiques, and that great rivalry, are we going to ever see an NHL franchise back in Quebec?
I think we will. When you think of what's available, I mean, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just guessing like everybody, but I guess they're going to go and have a look at Vegas. They've done everything they can to get an expansion team. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure for sure, but I think you'll see Vegas probably be the front liner. The West needs 2 more teams. If Vegas is one, I doubt Quebec could be the other team because they're geographically it wouldn't work that Quebec would come in. I think Quebec's better bet would be maybe to try to get a relocation from the East. That is not easy. There hasn't been a lot of relocations, as everyone knows. The North Stars went from Minnesota to Dallas in the 90s. Winnipeg, they moved away as well. So, to Arizona. Now they got both of these are good franchises. They got their teams back. I think Quebec will get another team. They built a rink on the spec that they would get an NHL team again. It may take some time. I don't know how patient they will be, but they have to be. But I think it'll probably be a team in the East because the East has their 16 teams, and the footprint down the line, they would like to see 32 teams, 16 in each conference, and it's changed right now. It's 16 in the East and 14 in the West. So if the West gets an expansion franchise, I think they're probably waiting for a city like Seattle. That's the talk that you hear about at Seattle. They haven't built a building yet. Somebody's going to go in there with a major league franchise. So, I think they've waited this long. They would wait enough time to get another team in the West, and Seattle would be certainly an ideal place. But Quebec would probably have to hope and pray that they could get a relocation, and they're not easy to get either. But I would bet that they'll get a team. They have a lot of resources behind them. They've got a spokesperson now, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney. They've hired him to work his magic, if he can, into the NHL. So my feeling is, yes, they will get a team. It may take a little while.
I sure hope you're right. I think it'd be great to see Quebec get a team, and it'd be great for hockey to see those Montreal games with Quebec. It's such a great rivalry back and forth. Miss Kendall.
Yes. Sorry, I thought you were going to ask. I was like, oh, I'm so excited. I was just doing a little bit of homework on you, Scotty, before we got on the phone with you, but I read all about what happened with you in St. Louis and how that's really where you started your NHL career at the ripe age of 34. And you were so successful down there because of the way that the league has expanded and become more of a national sport everywhere in not only just this country, but it's becoming bigger and bigger in other parts of the world too. Do you think that that's really possible for people to start their career in the NHL with only a little bit of stuff going on in the minor leagues and then be as successful as you were at an age of 34?
Well, I got injured as a player, and I started to coach immediately. I just started youth hockey when I was actually coaching, kids 3 or 4 years younger than me. And then I got into junior hockey when I was actually 21, and the age limit was 20. So I was always seen to be coaching people of the same age, and I did coach, when you really think about it, until I got into St. Louis in 1967. I started coaching in youth hockey in 54, but full-time in 1956. So I really put in 11 years of moving around, coaching junior teams, doing some scouting for 2 or 3 years, which I really didn't like too much. So I got back coaching. So I was one of the few coaches in those days. I mean, it's a long time ago. It's nearly 50 years ago. But in those days, players would become coaches after their careers were over. There wasn't too many that took it up at a young age. So I got a real head start on a lot of people. And we're looking back, we're pretty fortunate the league decided to go from 6 to 12 teams in one shot. And actually, it's hard to believe that those 6 teams stayed in their own division, until other teams came into the next expansion. But it was a unique kind of expansion to go from 6 to 12. It gave me my opportunity, and I think that's what people now have to, you have to be patient, because I coached 10 years of other teams until I got a shot at the NHL. I was young when I started. I wasn't impatient or anything. I didn't know if I'd ever get a chance, but I really think I got a chance because the league expanded.
You won 5 cups with the Montreal Canadiens, and I was lucky enough on the TV side working with the Minnesota Wild to break in when Jacques Lemaire was our head coach and Mario Tremblay was his number 1 assistant. You coached those guys in the heyday of the Montreal Canadiens dynasty. What were those guys like as players? Because as coaches, you could definitely see the diverse differences in their personalities as they coached the Minnesota Wild. I can only imagine what they were like as players for you, Scotty.
Well, Jacques was a superstar player. He was. I actually started coaching junior hockey when Jacques was only 16 or 17.
Wow.
I had him as a junior, and then I went to St. Louis, and of course he moved up with the Canadiens, and then I came back after my 4th year with the Blues back to Montreal. By then he had just started to get established as a star. And the part of the game that Jacques could do so well is he was a two-way player. He was always a high-scoring player when he first started, and then he got onto the game as far as you could play him against anybody. He just had that knack of being able to produce offensively, but he was a trusted defensive player, like killing penalties, taking face-offs. He's an all-round player. He's a Hall of Fame player. Now Mario was a much different type of player. He's more a grinding type of winger. He was an important player on a great team, and I was fortunate when I went to Detroit, and I had another group of players. People always focus on usually the top 2 lines of a team, the ones that are popping in all the goals and scoring all the points. But the role players are so important because they have to accept a tough role. They're not going to get the real gravy, contract-wise, whatever way you want to look at it. But they're important players because when the playoffs start, you're not going to win with just a few players. You need the balance. You need players replacing injured players. And Mario was a good, I wouldn't call him a role player. He probably would have been a second-line player with any other team. But in Montreal, he became a grinding player on a third line. He played regularly. Produced against the type of players that he played against. And there were 2 different kinds of players, but they meant a lot to the team, both in their own way.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of players that you've had, who is really your favorite all-time that you've coached? And I know there's a lot, but do you have even just a top 2?
I always think about that. I gravitated to a lot of superstars, but I enjoyed those other kind of players in Montreal. We had guys like Bob Gainey, Doug Jarvis. When I was in Detroit, we had fellas like Chris Draper. He's gone on to work in the office now with the Red Wings. But when I look back at all the players I had, I was very fortunate because when I went with St. Louis, Red Berenson was probably the number 1 player in the Western Conference. We got him in a trade with the Rangers. They had a pretty strong team and they had excess players, and Red became a superstar in the West Division. And but when I look back, I guess the Canadians had 10 or 11 Hall of Fame players. The Red Wings must be pretty close, so they'll have that many eventually when I guess Pavel Datsyuk is not going to miss. But I did a survey last month for a magazine, and they asked me to guess how many Hall of Fame players that I was able to coach. And I said, well, I didn't coach them into Hall of Fame players, but they sure made my job easy. And I had 40. There was 40 players that are in the Hall of Fame that played for me, and oddly enough, one player who's not in the Hall of Fame as a player, but he played for me, but he's a builder, and that's the great person that was with Edmonton, now the Rangers, Glenn Sather.
Oh, yes.
Who actually, I'm pretty sure he played with the North Stars, too.
Yes, he did.
We had Glenn in Montreal for 2 years, I think, as a role player, but now I haven't coached for 15 years now, or 13 years, but there's 2 more coming that that'll make it an even 42. Jaromir Jagr is still playing. He'll have to wait 3 years before, I don't know when he's going to retire. And Pavel Datsyuk, he'll be a Hall of Famer, I'm sure. So that's what I look back at. I mean, Mario Lemieux, Steve Yzerman, Guy Lafleur, the 3 defensemen in Montreal on one team that could have been on the All-Star team. Guy Lapointe, Larry Robinson, Serge Savard. So, I just got so lucky to have so many players at the right time. But I don't think it's going to be possible for teams now to keep going and retain. I mean, it's been proven by a lot of the good teams that are moving players out because they can't fit them into the salary cap. And if the cap doesn't go up as fast as salaries go up, then you have to move them along, and you have to have the pipeline coming in. Players are coming from Europe, they're coming from colleges, they're coming from everywhere, and that's what teams are focusing on now. The development. Every team has a development program. They have coaches that are pretty qualified coaches, but they're coaching their players that aren't on their NHL teams. They're just coming up.
This is the Sports Ticket with Kevin Gorgan, Kendall Mark. Couple of quickies to close with our special guest, Hockey Hall of Famer Scotty Bowman. I've talked to so many players throughout the years that have played for the Wild, but have also played in Montreal, and they've expressed how different it was for them to be a player in the fishbowl that Montreal provided. They love the city, but they said there was something different. The pressure was different. You've coached in a lot of different cities. You've had success in a lot of different cities. How different was it, though, when you were behind the bench in Montreal?
Well, the pressure is a different kind of pressure. The pressure is there that they used to be judged by how many cups they would win, and if you didn't win the cup one year, they made it pretty uncomfortable being, I was from there, so it was a lot different. So you are kind of looked at differently, if you're coaching the Montreal Canadiens. But, yeah, I think some players need that little push. They can handle it. But there's other players that really want to shy away from it. They're not in the majority. They're in the minority. But, yeah, I've seen some good young players come into Montreal and become successful, even though they were not French Canadian, they were English, and they did their best to embrace the culture, and that's what I think the teams have to do, or players have to do. When they go in a place, they may as well just enjoy what else is around there, and there's a lot around in Montreal to enjoy. So we were fortunate. I got there in the heyday of the team, and the 70s were a big decade for Canadians, winning they won. I think I won 5 cups there, but the team you could keep the players in those days, so it was a lot easier.
What's it like working with your son? He's now regarded as one of the best general managers in the NHL. Is that really cool? Is it kind of sometimes tense? What's that like?
Well, I kind of stay away from the relationship that people would think. I talk to a lot of other people that I'm sure the message goes back to he being the general manager. So I just feel more comfortable working with other people rather than trying to work with the general manager, because I am a consultant. My job is pretty limited. I go to all the home games in Tampa with the Lightning. That's what I enjoy doing. I watch their home schedule, and I enjoy that part of it. And I watch other teams for the Hawks and give my reports on player personnel. But that's I don't do as much communicating on a hockey basis with Stan as people think, because I feel more comfortable dealing with people that work in the organization in other capacities.
That makes a lot of sense, too. You're going to let him kind of do his thing and find his way. And it's just remarkable that you're still going strong after the credentials you've put out there, Mr. Bowman. It's just great. It's great to have you around the game. Great to have you involved with two great franchises right now. And looks like they're going to be good for a long, long time. And I know we're going to get a good look up here at the Chicago Blackhawks again tomorrow night. We want to thank you for spending some time with us and wish you a happy holiday ahead. I know it's got to be a special time, too, when you're working kind of right there alongside some family members, but Christmas right around the corner. Wish you a happy holidays, and thank you again for being a part of our show today, sir.
Oh, same to you and all the people in the state of hockey. I've always enjoyed Minnesota. I had a real pleasure of having Mike Ramsey as a player, drafting him, and Phil Housley, and I was also a pretty good friend of the late Herb Brooks. So I go back. Minnesota has a special feeling for me in hockey because of my background and the time that I was able to spend watching high school tournaments and things like that. So thank you very much for having me.
What a pleasure. Scotty Bowman, the legendary coach, Hockey Hall of Famer. And when you've got 42 players that played for you that end up in the Hall of Fame, you've done more than just a little right along the way in your career. Just a remarkable guy on and off the ice. I've met him a couple of times, and now, again, we had a chance to converse today. But everyone always says the same thing. As good as he was as a coach and administrator, he's a better guy off the ice, and you can just feel the love that he has for the experience and the game. To me, that's kind of what makes Scotty Bowman so special, is you can feel the love and passion he has for the game and the people that are in the game just with one little 20-minute conversation.
Right. You know, it's not that I thought he was going to be rude or anything at all. It's so refreshing and so cool to hear those people that have accomplished everything. I mean, really.
Done it all. He's done it all.
And to still just be, oh, yeah, say hi to everyone from Minnesota. And, yeah, I'd love to be on your show. And you're like, really? You do that? That's nice. I mean, it's amazing to me that, you hear about people with these attitude problems all the time, and these guys that don't want to do this. Look what had just happened with Ezekiel Elliott, for example. And this kid's just in college, and he just didn't win one game, and he's like all upset, and he's never going to play for Ohio State again. And then you talk to somebody of Scotty Bowman's generation, and it's just that class.
It's amazing.
That exudes from all of them. That is really sweet, and I love that about hockey as a sport. I think that you get it so much more in hockey than you do with other sports. I mean, you can attest to that,
it's a different vibe because you have to earn your way in. And I loved your question about the ripe age of 34 and how he kind of came to coaching. And you could sense, even in that brief answer he gave, how much work it took to get in there and the dream he had. You could even hear it in his voice. He hoped at some point he'd get that chance. Mm-hmm. And, it was meant to be. Clearly, it was serendipitous that he found his way to a National Hockey League bench. The numbers are ridiculous. The wins that he put up are never probably going to be touched. The Stanley Cup wins will certainly never be touched with 9. And you can, I think, look at the work ethic he put out there. He had an injury that stopped his playing career. There had to be another way to be involved in the game. And I think most players will tell you no matter when it happens, when the playing days are over, the next best thing for them is to be coaching, because you still get the nerves, the energy still there. You're on the bench. You're a part of the club. You're the team dinners, the camaraderie, it's still a part of it for you. And I've talked to guys like Darby Hendrickson and Andrew Brunette and Daryl Sador, and that is what drew them into that spot. And I'm certain for Scotty Bowman, because his playing career was cut short at a very young age, that was the next thing in mind. Mm-hmm. And he found a way to get it done and put out a spectacular career. But even at age 82, it'd be easy for him to be retired right now and living the good life down in Florida on the beach. But no, he wants to be involved in the game. It's the game he loves. It's in his blood. And he'll probably do it until he can't do it anymore. And that's great for hockey because we're lucky to have him in the game still. Mm-hmm. And hopefully some of that class that he exuded that you could just sense on our brief conversation here on the Sports Ticket trickles down to administrators he works with, to coaches and players that he certainly is still impacting at age 82. Before we finish up the show, we're going to remind you here on the Sports Ticket that we will be live and in person. West 7th is the spot, Patrick McGovern's Pub, this Thursday to get you ready for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Minnesota Wild. Speaking of great coaches that have won multiple cups, Mike Babcock and the Toronto Maple Leafs come to town Thursday. Stop by. 3:30 is the time. A 1-hour live presentation, Coors Light specials, Patrick McGovern's Pub. I was there on Saturday for a birthday party for a family friend, and it was awesome. We were there all night long after the Wild game. Great. I mean, I just loved the food. I loved the atmosphere. TVs everywhere. We were watching hockey. We were watching college football. It was all right there for us, and it was a really cool birthday party. A friend of mine's dad turned 70. We had family in from all over the place, and they just loved it. So come on down and see us at Patrick McGovern's on Thursday. Monday, we're going to be over at the Southdale Mall, the brand new Dave & Buster's, and what a great time to open up a Dave & Buster's. Holiday season upon us, and when you go shopping and you power shop and you've got little ones with you, you want to have some levity, some fun, and distraction for the kids. Stop on by Southdale Mall next Monday, 5 o'clock, a 1-hour show in Edina. And hopefully, Kendall, as we take a look at the week ahead before we close the show, the Wild can get back on track. Now, tomorrow's going to be tough in Chicago against the Hawks, but then you have a home game against Toronto and a home game against Colorado. They've got to win at least 2 of these 3 and kind of just right the ship. There's some tension around the building right now, and I know Mike Yeo is disappointed with the way their team is playing, but they're not that far off. And Scotty Bowman made a great point. A bulk of the 1-4-2 run that the Wild were in the middle of experiencing here, no Marco Scandella, no Justin Fontaine, and most importantly, through 5 of those 7 games, no Zach Parise. Those 3 guys look like they're all going to be back tomorrow night in the lineup. Parise's 3rd game back, Fontaine's 2nd game back, and we think Marco Scandella returns. Different hockey team with those guys in the lineup.
It will be a different hockey team. I'm excited to see him on Thursday, too. If you want to say hi to me, please come early because I'll have to leave a little bit early to go over
and
to the
there'll be a line for people to see you because it's like
seriously
unbelievable the amount of fans you have.
It's just crazy. I hope everyone knows that this is dripping with sarcasm. but I'm excited to see Scandella and his big body back in the lineup. And I just, as a question for you, because of all this tension that we as fans see just on TV, I mean, when you're back there with them, is it very palpable? Can you cut it with like a butter knife?
Well, you can sense it. There's no question because we're around these guys all the time, whether it's the morning skates, which are the game day practices, the regular practices, the bus rides, the airplane. You're around them enough to know their personalities, and when things are going well, they all want to talk. You know, they'll talk about just about fantasy football. They'll talk about kids and parenting and other sports and holidays. And when things aren't going well, it gets a little quiet. And, sometimes they'll want to talk just to get their mind off the negativity, but sometimes they just kind of want to be left alone. And they're afraid that any conversation with anybody in the media is going to lead back to what's wrong. I think they really get fed up with the what's wrong question. I don't think they're that far off, but, just looking back at last year when it got really negative and seeing where they're at right now, there are some similarities, but this is a much smaller sample size. But, yeah, you can feel the tension. We're around these guys enough to know. And when we come back and do the show Thursday over at McGovern's, we'll have another game in the rearview mirror. We'll have a better look at where they're at, specifically against the best team in the league, still the Cup champion Blackhawks. But, yeah, there's going to be, I think, a tipping point here. Ryan Suter expressed some frustration after practice today because he's back with Jonas Brodin, and he really likes Brodin. We all do as a player, but they're a pair of lefties, and how difficult that can be breaking the puck out when you've got 2 guys with the same side, and one has to play their offside, how uncomfortable that can be. And there's just some tension. And when the coach calls a team out, especially when you've got a lot of superstars, which the Wild certainly do, feelings get hurt. The one thing that will cure everything is to get this team all back together, pushing in the same direction. And I'll say this, watching the games last week, the Vancouver game and the Winnipeg game, they didn't look good at all. They didn't look like they were moving the puck or moving their feet effectively. Throughout most of the first half of the Dallas game, I liked what I saw. They earned that 3-0 lead because they were playing high-octane hockey. They were efficient.
Fun.
They were moving the puck. They were moving their feet. It was fun. They got a lead. They were up 3-0 going to the third, and they sat back. A lot of teams do that in this league on a lot of different nights. They did it. It cost them.
Right.
No need to panic. Let's see what they've got this week with a full roster back in play and 2 home games against teams, frankly, in Toronto and Colorado that aren't nearly as good as the Wild. So even if they get beat tomorrow, which I think they might, I think they're going to win 2 games this week. And I think once they win those 2 games, people can take a deep breath, take a page out of Aaron Rodgers' playbook, and just relax. It'll be fine. So make sure to come by and see us on Thursday, once again at Patrick McGovern, starting at 3:30, and then next Monday, 5 o'clock, Dave & Buster's in Edina. We want to thank Aaron, our producer, for hooking us up with that hockey legend, Scotty Bowman, who was super cool to talk to. 20 minutes of fantastic hockey talk. I will not forget that. What a highlight just to be in the same midst as a guy like that. Thank the Vikings for saving our sports weekend because everybody else lost. And look forward to some more great fantasy football speculation on Thursday. We take those waiver wire selections and give you 5 to bank on and 5 that you want to bench.
And hear my fantasy football stories because those are fun.
Oh, they're always fun. And
always
boy,
fun.
are you in a tough spot here as we head to the final couple weeks of the fantasy football season. For our producer, Aaron, for Miss Kendall Mark, I'm Kevin Gork, thanking you, the season ticket holders, for joining us on the Sports Ticket right here on the Alive and Social Network.